Welcome back to episode 24 of the Queer Money Podcast. Here's one thing that David and I don't talk about. We don't coordinate our clothing. So very often we'll both come out of the closet wearing the same thing.
Right, this is an accident.
This is an accident. It
I
happens.
actually had a sweatshirt over this, or a pull-up, zippered pull-up sweatshirt over this. So John didn't know I was wearing this until I took that off.
Yeah, and so this happens quite a bit. You think we would talk about it by now because we do have a lot of the same clothing because we go to the same conferences together. And we get a lot of the same T-shirts. One thing that we do talk a lot about, though, is money. And that's the topic of this particular Queer Money follow-up. Because on Queer Money follow-up...
Money isn't the topic. Talking about money is the topic.
Talking about money is the topic. Because on Queer Money episode 24, we interviewed Cathy Pareto, who is a financial advisor, and that episode was titled Heroes, Olives, and Financial Advisors, What You Should Know About LGBT Financial Planning. Yeah. And there was a wealth of information on there. We were excited to talk with Cathy for two reasons, though. Not only is she an amazing financial planner who's a lesbian, but she is a trailblazer in the state of Florida. She and her wife, Karla, were the first LGBT couple, same-sex couple, to get married in the state of Florida. Cathy shares that whole story about how she and her wife and five other couples were suing the state of Florida, and how the circuitous path of events that kind of led them to Cathy and Karla being the first same-sex couple getting married in the state of Florida was very interesting and exciting. So you definitely want to listen to this episode to hear that. But then also, Karla and Cathy were the first same-sex couple to challenge the birth certificate laws in the state of Florida, because up until that particular case was won on behalf of the LGBTQ community, two people of the same gender could not be on a single birth certificate. Two parents of the same gender could not be on the same birth certificate. And Cathy and Karla fought that with their attorney, Liz Schwartz, as well. So they're trailblazers in the LGBT community, especially down in the state of Florida. But not only that, Cathy is an amazing financial planner. So we had her come on to talk about, her practice, financial planning, as well as financial planning specific to the LGBT community. Now, a lot has changed since this particular episode, obviously. Of course, we had marriage equality by the time of this particular interview, but then we had just recently in June, this U.S. Supreme Court added protections for LGBTQ workers in the workplace. And then just last week, President Biden issued a whole bunch of executive orders that added more protections for LGBTQ individuals, not only in the workplace, but for services and for housing and other protections. Again, as we've said on previous episodes of the Queer Money Follow-Up and the Queer Money Podcast, we're not exactly sure what that will look like in real life, but we are definitely making progress. So some things have definitely improved or changed. But what we want to focus on this particular Queer Money Follow-Up about is the need for same-sex couples to start talking about money, because in the LGBT community as well as in the straight community, finance is one of the top 3 reasons why couples break up. Yeah. And lack of intimacy is one of the top 3 reasons why couples break up. And did you know that talking about money can fix those 2 problems?
Well, can help fix at least fix the first one, but I think the second one, the intimacy one, because we interviewed Sam Schultz on one of the episodes of our podcast, and we talked about how
same-sex couples are 54% more likely to report having better sex when they talk about money than if they don't.
Right. Just think about that. If you knew that just talking about money with your partner would lead to better sex, why wouldn't you? Right.
Right. And it'll also, studies have shown, and from actual studies and our own anecdotal research, that simply talking about money as an individual among friends and family, or talking about money with your respective spouse, just makes you make better decisions, because you're keeping your finances in your consciousness. And that's one of the reasons why the folks who joined our weekly credit card payoff course call love that particular call so much, because it keeps their finances top of mind.
Right.
And even though life hasn't necessarily gotten easier, they're making slightly better financial decisions on a day-to-day basis. And those small, slightly better financial decisions on a day-to-day basis compound on each other. And over time, that leads to massive results. As we've talked about lots of times on the podcast, small decisions, small habits repeated over time lead to massive progress.
Right. So we have the question for you. Do you and your partner or spouse, do you regularly talk about money? We'd love to hear it in the comments.
You can't
comments
hear you in the comments.
Right. We'd love to read your comments, or just in the chat here. Tell us, do you talk to your partner about money? Maybe to even tell us, if you do, how often you do. It is kind of curious, because one of the other things that has come out of data that John and I, obviously we do a lot of research and digging in LGBT data, but this was one from Mass Mutual quite a while back. This was I want to say this was 2018, and we know that things probably have only gotten worse from this because of COVID. Roughly 56% of LGBT folks worry about money on a weekly basis. If you take that out to a monthly basis or quarterly or yearly basis, that number goes up just because the time horizon is longer. But if that is the case, if so many of us, over half of us, are worried about money or worrying about money on a regular basis, is causing us financial stress, talking about it at first may be difficult, may be uncomfortable, but what that does do is it allows you to uncover what issues there are that may need some help, some addressing, so that you can alleviate some of that stress.
Yeah, so much is improved simply by talking about it. Now, of course, and I think there's an aversion in the general population, broadly speaking, to talk about money and finance, because to a lot of people it seems scary, right? It's the basis of it is math, and also we have a lot of money emotions tied to money, so that kind of creates an aversion there. But I think that the LGBT community has an extra layer of pressure because so many of us have come from times and places when it wasn't okay to be gay. So our money story is grossly affected by that. Right. And if we expose that we're not as well-to-do, as well off as we are, if we let people know that even though I have these fabulous shoes, I've got a 400-point credit score and $50,000 in credit card debt, then people will think that, hey, I'm not as awesome as I'm portraying to the world that I am. And then here I go again, dealing with all my limiting beliefs and all the bullshit I brought with me from childhood. So I think we have this extra aversion to not talk about finance as a community or as a couple, because we don't want to expose that side of ourselves. But therein lies the benefit of talking about money with your partner, because if you're willing to expose that side of yourself, if you're willing to come out of the closet to your partner about your financial situation, then that adds to a layer of trust and openness, and can lead to the intimacy that Sam Schultz and Honeyfi talked about in their study.
Yeah, and one of the questions that we have discussed on a number of occasions on the podcast and with folks in the Queer Money Facebook group is this idea of when do you start talking to the partner or prospective partner about money? And unfortunately for John and I, it didn't happen until a year and a half into our relationship, and we're so thankful that we did finally have that conversation, because that allowed us to fix things. To be honest, had we not started talking about money, I am sure that our lifestyle and habits would have led to the relationship burnout that so many other folks experience, right? The intimacy goes down, the
fighting goes up.
The fighting goes up, the level of financial infidelity and possibly even physical infidelity increases, the desire to hide stuff from your partner. When you don't tell your partner or partners the truth about yourself, that builds up a calloused habit of not telling them the truth about other aspects of your life.
Yeah, it has a reciprocal effect. Well, then also too, if you're not honest about how you're spending, especially your joint money, or how you're managing your joint finances, if you're somehow lying about that, then that, we know that, a lie can spread. So all of a sudden you're having to tell lies on top of lies on top of lies, and suddenly it's like, why are we even together? You don't even really know me or our situation correctly. So and our financial situation's horrible, and all we do is fight about finances, and that leads us to fight about other things. You might as well just part ways.
Right. So getting back to that question, when should you start talking to your partner about finances? And our suggestion is as early as you possibly can. John and I believe we had a little bit of a disagreement on one of the podcasts about this. I personally believe that it should be somewhere between the time period in which you have the first date and when you actually make that commitment that this is somebody you're going to date. And the reason I say that is I think that you don't want to start to head down a path of intimacy and getting into a relationship with someone who you may end up being at odds with when it comes to your finances. We've had several people in the Queer Money Facebook group actually say this to the group, that they recently broke up with someone because of their finances. I mentioned this a couple of days ago, as I think when we were talking about couples and money on another occasion. One lesbian individual told us that she broke up with her partner because she felt like she and her partner just never could get on the same page financially. Her partner was literally stealing from their joint account, and because she was could not give up the lifestyle of spending and living the habits that she wanted. And so the woman who exposed this said, I just didn't feel like we could ever make progress. I was not going to be able to make the kind of financial progress in my life. And that's why I think it's important to do this early on. There are ways to kind of scratch the surface and to uncover that. You don't have to right on the first date say, okay, lay it all out. Tell me what is going on with your finances.
Show me all your stuff.
Right. But I think that there's a tactful way to try to start to slowly uncover that before you make this kind of longer term commitment towards someone.
So before we go any further, as always, please give this video a thumbs up. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel and set notifications on this channel so that when we have these discussions, you get a notification and you can join in on the conversation. One of the things that has come up in the Queer Money Facebook group a couple of times is this idea that so many folks in the LGBT community, it seems to be more with gay men than with the other letters of the alphabet, seem to be waiting for this Prince Charming to come and help them and save them.
I already have mine.
And while it worked out for me, it doesn't work out for all the Cinderellas. They're waiting for this Prince Charming to come and to save them from all their financial challenges and to help get their lives to the level that they ultimately would like for it to get to. And you've said several times on the podcast, as well as these follow-ups, that the reason that the prince chose Cinderella was because he thought she was a partner, not a project. And that's similar to and you want to, that's why you want to kind of figure this out, who it is that you're actually getting with, understand the financial situations exclusively as well as together, before you actually decide to walk down the aisle and say I do. Because as we talked about on this particular podcast, and as we heard originally from William S. Matthews on a podcast prior to episode 24, you want to make sure that your marriage is a merger and not a buyout.
Yeah.
And so many...
Or a hostile takeover.
And so many gay men seem to think that somebody wants to sort of buy them out. And I'm not really sure why that's the case. Maybe it's sort of lazy thinking or lazy... I don't know. I think honestly, I think it's just wishful thinking. Wishful thinking,
right?
Yeah.
Because we are looking for that quick win, that easy way out, the way to uncover or get out of the hole we've dug for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And I completely get it, right? I mean, I would love to. I don't play the lottery, but I would love to win the lottery because of the benefits I think that it could bring to me financially and what I could do with that money to help the community. But that isn't, we've said this before. That isn't a strategy. It's not a solution. That's a wishful thinking possibility that might happen, but it's highly unlikely that's going to happen. But I think when it comes to this idea of looking for someone else to come and save us, it is a somewhat of a giving away our power. Right? If we don't actually believe that we can do it ourselves, then we don't take on the power of being able to do it ourselves. If you don't believe that you can actually pay your debt off, that you can become a financial success or create good money habits, if you don't believe it, you won't do it.
Right.
And it's like Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Yeah.
And I think that's what has happened to a lot of men in the gay community is they've seen a couple of times where a sugar daddy comes along and picks somebody up and rescues them, or that's what that sugar daddy literally is looking for, is they're looking for a sugar baby that they can come along and rescue because they themselves want to have that feeling of, I rescued this person, right?
The superhero complex.
Exactly. But that is so infrequent. And when you really think about it, the vast majority of successful people want to be around other successful people, because not only does it challenge them, but they learn from them. And so that's why more often than not, you're going to see that successful gay men, successful lesbians, successful trans people are attracted to other successful people. And so it's wishful thinking, but don't build your life strategy around it.
Yeah, everything you just talked about there reminds me of Gary Zukav's definition of marriage, and he says that marriage is a partnership of equals, helping each other reach the highest version of themselves. It's not me saving you. It's not you saving me or lifting me up. It's a partnership of equals where we work together to try to improve all aspects of our lives in tandem. And I think so often, as we're kind of talking about, especially with gay men, we're looking for somebody to save us. And we're not looking for a partnership of equals. We're looking for somebody better than us to come along. But to your point, we're giving up our power. And what is the likelihood that there are that many superheroes out there if there are so many of us who need the saving?
Well, and I think that may be the other maybe issue with the community. You and I put on the facade of being successful, but in reality had a massive amount of debt, and it was preventing us from being successful. If there are a lot of gay men out there or a lot of queer people out there that are putting on this fabulousness facade, then maybe the thought is, oh, well, there must be a lot of rich gay people out there, so one of them must want to rescue me, or
right.
One of them must find me attractive, and then once we're in a relationship, they can rescue me. Right. I mean, literally, we did have an acquaintance of ours say that to us. I'll just marry a rich person. When we were talking to them about their financial situation.
Well, in his situation, it worked.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, but we've also seen...
But we've seen more often than not that strategy doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I think my guess is that the straight community maybe has a similar percentage of people who are looking to be rescued. But I think what oftentimes happens with more easily than with gay men, especially, but in the LGBT community, is that we don't have the babies as soon, if at all. And I think kind of plop in another life form in there that you're responsible for, quickly changes the paradigm for everybody.
Plop?
It's plop. Like that stork just goes, psh, bam, you got a baby. Your life is ruined for 25 years.
Not ruined. Oh, kids are so much fun.
Yes. And so all of a sudden, I think for a lot of the straight population, it doesn't always work out perfectly, but there's this extra incentive to get our shit together. Whereas gay men we know from studies that we're less likely to have children, so we don't have that variable that kind of inspires us to make better decisions.
Right.
So
we're only responsible for ourselves.
Right.
And when we're only...
Even when we're in a relationship, ultimately we see ourselves as only responsible for ourselves.
I think that pattern of happened even up until in many cases, up until marriage equality, and maybe even now, there's a lot of same-sex couples who are in relationships who technically could be married, could take advantage of the tax benefits of marriage, but don't get married because they don't want to, quote unquote, succumb to the norm. And because of that, either that thinking or just because they just haven't gotten around to getting married, I think that they maybe still look at themselves as separate.
Yeah.
And when you look at yourselves as separate, then you don't really look at yourself as a team and responsible for each other.
Right.
When legally, in many
A lot
cases,
of those
you
people
may,
are common law married,
right.
and that's a whole other problem.
Right. Legally, you may be responsible for each other, especially when it comes to finances. You may be responsible for the person you're living with in their
Right.
financial situation.
So I just have to say, and the light is coming in here, and it's really washing up my face, and I'm looking kind of young. I like it. So how do you get that money conversation started? Well, David and I have 5 tips that we're going to share. We dive into this much more in actually episode 24 of this particular podcast episode. So if you want more information, go there. But for a high-level overview, we've got 5 tips. 1, blame us. Instigate the money conversation with your partner, your boyfriend, your spouse, however new you are and however early you want to have this conversation. Just simply say that you saw on this YouTube video, or you heard on the Crib Money podcast, or you saw at debt-free-guys.com. There's this gay couple out there telling me we need to talk about money. So blame it on us and say that that was the inspiration for bringing up the conversation. That can kind of take some of the pressure off of why you want to actually have the talk. You want to share number 2?
Sure. We suggest that you start this conversation in a public place. Now, that may be a little bit more difficult right now because of
COVID.
this long, dragging out COVID. But we suggest that you try to do it in a public place. So, for example, outdoor coffee shop, in a park, somewhere where you're in a situation, or in an environment, I should say, not a situation. You're in an environment where it's less likely that when you start to have the conversation that either of you will get into a heated argument. Because for a lot of folks, the whole idea of talking about money, people get very defensive. And so that can cause some heated discussions. And you want at least first couple of discussions to not be headed in that direction.
Exactly. Money, like sex, is best done in public.
No.
Number 3, very often what instigates people to have the money conversation is that there's a bounce check. You missed a payment. All of a sudden, a credit card bill came in that you didn't expect, or to be as big as you expected.
Somebody spent too much money on Amazon.
Maybe, whatever. And so it's usually instigated by a negative source. So we want to challenge you when you have this, at least the first few conversations like David talked about, focus on what your hopes and dreams are, whether they're your individual hopes and dreams or your mutual hopes and dreams. Like, where do you see us retiring someday? What do you see retirement looking like?
Miami.
What would
we'll be the Golden Girls, but we won't be living in Miami.
We won't be. What dream vacations do you both want to go on together? Do you want to get married? What kind of wedding do you want to have? Do you want to have children? How many children do you want to have? Kind of think about those sort of lofty goals. Start from there, and then sort of reverse engineer. Like, what is it going to take for us to get there? How much money do we need to have to achieve these goals? Okay, now that we know how much we're going to need to have to achieve these goals, how much do we need to save from year to year? And then how much do we need to save from month to month? And really stair-step it into what those big goals are. And then at that point say, okay, well, what's preventing us from being able to make to do this savings, to do this investing? What credit card debt do we have to pay off? What other debt do we have to pay off? How do we have to budget so that it supports what those bigger goals are? Focus on those bigger, happier things and then back into it.
Right. So you just took 3 and 4.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did.
Oops, I did. I'm so good. I can just riff, not even pay attention.
Number 1 was blame us. Number 2 was have the money talk in a public place so you don't have arguments. Number 3, focus on your individual and mutual hopes and dreams, whether they be short-term, simple vacation maybe, because a lot of us are really jonesing for getting out and doing a little bit of travel, right? So that might be a great place to start. Where would that vacation be? And then, as John mentioned, backing into those hopes and dreams, how would you achieve those financially? And then the last one, that is, make this a regular habit. Revisit this conversation, your conversations about money, at least on a monthly basis. Having that monthly meeting is so important. It helps for you to figure out who's going to accept which responsibilities. It cannot all be put on one person. It cannot be controlled by one person. This should be a mutually beneficial and a mutually responsible activity, because you are a couple or more in a relationship.
And if you want additional help to make this discussion and this work more effective and positive, from now through Valentine's Day, February 14th, I forgot what day it was, we're having a limited time offer, a 2-for-1 sale of our Couples Money Guide, which is a couples money guide designed by gay people for gay people, as well as with our Budget Buster bundle to help create a budget. So you talk about finances and hash out and figure out all your financial matters in one place. Also create a budget. We're offering both of those, usually $27 for each, both right now through February 14th, just for $27 only.
Yeah, 2-for-1 on that.
2-for-1. So thank you for joining us for another Crib Money follow-up. Here's your Crib Money follow-up takeaway from this particular episode. Please subscribe to the Crib Money podcast at debtfreeguys.com/QM. Then let us know in the comments section below. We'd really love to know. Do you and your partner talk about money at all, if not at least hopefully regularly?
Yeah.
Then,
and if you do talk regularly, or have that conversation, tell us how often. We're curious to see what other couples are doing. For us, we just have to talk about money almost every single day, because that's what our business is talking about money. So we have our personal money that we talk about, we have our business money that we talk about, and we have other people's money that we talk about, the people that we coach.
And tomorrow we're going to cover episode 25 of the Queer Money Podcast, when we talk about boomer retirement. Will you be ready if you're a boomer for retirement?
Yeah.
That's kind of, if you're not ready now, it's a little bit late. So that was interesting.
Well, there are some tactics that we did cover on that, and we'll share with you some of those tomorrow.
Lastly, please give this video a thumbs up. Please subscribe to this channel, and then set notifications on this channel so you know when we have these Queer Money follow-up discussions and you can join in. Thank you, and we will see you tomorrow.
Have a good one.